Hi, everyone, and welcome to The Secret Art of Business. And today I am very honored to have Gresham Harkless, who is the owner of Blue 16 Media. And I'm going to say founder and CEO too, because I'm sure you're all that. And I looked at your website, which I thought was really kind of fun. But I really want you to talk about exactly what you do because there's a lot of things on there. And I'll just give you the floor. Tell us about
Yeah,
your company, Blue 16 Media.
absolutely, Catherine. I appreciate being on the show, and I appreciate everything that you're doing. And kind of at Blue 60 Media, what we do is we kind of help people with digital marketing. So that's web design, support, SEO services. But we also have a slew of media properties that help to help CEOs, entrepreneurs, and business owners, or even just individuals to succeed. And of course, that depends on what success means to you. So there's lots of different properties that kind of approach that in many different ways. So we have a lot of hacks and stuff like CEO hacks that help people to be more effective and efficient. I have podcasts and also blogs and lots of content around entrepreneurship and what that means to kind of help support people. So at the heart of it, what we do is we help people to build their own media companies, as I like to say, but we also have our own media properties too that help people to be more effective and efficient.
And I really like that because in some cases, people just need to kind of delegate. They're like, they have these huge goals of I could do it all, but then they're like, you know what? It might be easier to delegate this. And I want you to kind of explain this little community you've kind of created on your website too. So how would that, if as I'll just be the CEO coming to your website, what am I going to find there? Because I saw a lot of things there.
Yes, you will find a lot. So I will say the search bar is definitely your friend. So if you notice something specifically that you're looking for, don't be afraid to go through and search. And in the way that it's all integrated, it's different sites, but it all really focuses on different aspects of entrepreneurship. And I really believe that at the heart of entrepreneurship is we, of course, want to know about the financials. You want to know what your marketing strategy is, your branding. You have to make sure that you have your P&Ls and your equity, and all these things are in place. But I think we so often forget about the person. So a lot of what and how the sites and the subsites are structured are around the different aspects of entrepreneurship, around the interests around entrepreneurship. So, for example, we have a site that's called Herepreneur, and that site is focused a lot more on hearing from entrepreneurs, hearing their stories, getting motivation. So it's like an entirely different psychology than another site, which is more of a teach a CEO site, which is more pedantic. It takes you through how to create a Facebook page or different statistics or infographics and all of those things. So at again, as a whole, you can search through each of the different aspects of the site, but each of them has their own kind of psychology, even
Oh, nice.
focus. Like we have a DC, Maryland, and Virginia site since I'm in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. So again, it's just really understanding that let's not forget about the human aspect of business and see how can we find information, hopefully connect with people that we hope to serve.
I absolutely love this for a variety of reasons, but I'm going to pick the one that's top of mind for me right now is that you are clearly a visionary creative person because you keep making things. You keep just making and adding things. What made you have a very good business with Blue 16, but what made you decide to add all these other elements to it?
You know what's so funny is I think that I wish I could say that I was, had this master plan where I said, let me create this marketing company and then let me add all these other things. It actually went the opposite way where I was just truthfully interested in entrepreneurship and business. And I, I like to say tendencies, entrepreneurial tendencies before I even knew how to spell entrepreneur, even when I knew what that was.
I still struggle.
And it was, yes, exactly. So do I. Thank you for Grammarly. I really love the fact that I just had this journalistic mindset where I said, hey, let me just find out what entrepreneurship is. What is it like to run a business? What advice would people have for people that are thinking about starting businesses? Why'd you come up with your business name? Just all these questions that I had. And I started to take those questions and I started to compile them on the site. So they were just like roundup posts, which I basically say are like a compilation of different answers from different CEOs, entrepreneurs, and business owners. And I started to just compile more and more information. And that really is what led the basis for that, even before I started the digital marketing. Then I started to say, okay, well, let's talk about this word monetization. Like, how would you actually build this into a sustainable business? And that's where I started to see that at that time when newspapers and everything in the journalism world was kind of upside down. people were looking at creative ways to try to figure out how to monetize. So some people were doing like social media consultation, and other people were doing the traditional advertising and things along that way. But for me, I knew that I was kind of like a geek at heart. So I always worked on websites, I always built websites. I did a lot for my mom, who had an embroidery company. I had startup ventures when I was younger and things like that. And I said, you know what? Maybe some of the people that I'm interviewing might need help with their website. Maybe some of the people that I'm interviewing and talking to, maybe they want to know how to increase their visibility online. So I wish I could say that I was like, hey, let me build this marketing business and let me add on this extra. But it really was the opposite way, where things kind of took off.
No, that's really quite brilliant, actually. You kind of, really focused on something that you had an interest in, and it just kind of spawned this other thing to the side. And because, you're talking about, helping your mom and things like that, that's going to take us right to the journey of where you were as a child. So when you were younger, and obviously you're still creating and building things now, what did you do as a child that was really creative or fun, or was, everything you did before someone told you you had to get serious and get a job?
Yeah, and it's so funny. So I recently got married, so I have a stepson now, and he's 8 years old. And he was going out, and I don't know where he got the idea, but he said, "Hey, I want to sell potato chips." So he's testing out so many different things. But we took him around the neighborhood to knock on doors, to actually speak and try to get his communication a lot better, so that he could sell his potato chips. And it's funny because it actually took me back to when I was a kid, because that's something I remember my mom complaining about me doing. She said, "Hey, we would buy all these potato chips and things, and you would take them to school and you would go sell them." Or even like my wife now, she started to get in the hobby of creating beads, taking beads and creating, necklaces and
Mhm.
bracelets and stuff like that. And that's something that I did as a kid. So I've always like had this like curiosity of just trying and creating different things. And I think the thing that probably stood out to me more than anything else that kind of put me on the direction and the path that I am now is my dad was in the military. So he went to an entirely different country. He went remote for an entire year, which sucked because I was like 10 years old, and that was my buddy, my partner, and someone I would shoot basketball and do all these things. But before we had Skype, FaceTime, all these tools that we can instantly connect with people, my dad went TDY, and we would just kind of send messages through email. We would get phone calls every now and then, whenever he could. But I started a family newspaper. And the reason that I started that is because I couldn't get a job at the time. I was 10, but I also wanted to get some extra money for who knows what. And I would take all the things that were going on in our family. I would, sit down in front of Microsoft Word. I put some clip art in. I put a headline like, there was a squirrel that got into my grandma's house. And just all these different random stories that were happening on in our family. And we would send that along with, his favorite desserts and a care package to him every single month. So for me, that was kind of like the thing that, I saw a lot of people doing the beads and doing the potato chips, but I didn't know a lot of people that actually did that. But it wasn't until years and years later that I felt like that was something that kind of like stood out to me. But that was definitely probably one of my, biggest entrepreneurial, journeys and dips, I guess, in that kind of made me, I guess, who I am.
I absolutely love hearing stories about children that are so entrepreneurial. It's like, I'm going to make something, and then I'm going to sell it, and then I'm going to look at these potato chips. I bet I can get some money for this. I mean, I've talked to a couple of entrepreneurs that definitely started at a young age doing that, and it's just, I don't know. There's just something very charming about it. But I love it because you can see the path so clearly to kind of where you are today, where your mind is just whirling still with all these things, and you're just kind of building this life for yourself that's really kind of cool. I
Yeah.
will ask this though, which I don't usually I've not asked any of these entrepreneurial children before, is was there any time that you had off time, or were you always just so industrious?
It's so funny because it's so hard to understand. Like, I think I've always been like very creative or just wanting to start things. So I'm sure I definitely had off time because I was very creative. So I think I was very much so someone just like hey, this is of interest. This is something that I really like doing. So let me try to pursue it and see what that looks like. So I did everything from, more when I was older in like high school, built a computer. So I did all these, separate things. So I've always definitely been like, okay, I'm interested in this. I'm passionate. Why not try it? Sometimes it went well. Sometimes it didn't go so well.
Oh, exactly.
But I think there's a quote, and I can't remember who said it, is, find something you love to do. You never work a day in your life. I
Yes.
feel like even though I might have been always on, I never felt like I was always on. Like I think we would define it today. So it probably has, my perspective probably more than anything else has changed.
That is perfect. And that, I have not thought about that quote in a while, but that really speaks directly to what this podcast is all about. It is people finding joy in the work and kind of peppering in, the fun parts of it. And then you never feel like you're working. You don't get burnt out because you just want more and more and more of it. And, eventually the success comes, which is kind of cool. All right. Well, then I'm kind of afraid to ask, kind of what you're still doing now. Stay creative because you're going to probably blow my mind. But you have this company that just like this whirling mechanism of things. So what are you still doing to, stay creative and to have fun?
Yeah, I think it's something. It's funny enough. I think that one of the things that I've tried to be in the habit of doing is always kind of remembering that childhood Gresh and what kind of lit him up and things like that. Because I think I guess the sad thing to some degree, which is why I love everything that you're doing, is that we start to lose some of that childhood excitement and the things that kind of get us going. And I think that's something that I have to continue to kind of work on to make sure that, I'm continually mining that and continuing to create space for that creativity, because we can get so busy with all the things, that we're working on that we don't create time, for that. But for me, I try to, read and write a lot. That's always been like one of my big passions of taking time and creating space for that. I actually created I called it I Am Coloring book. So I have a podcast called the I Am CEO podcast, and I created a coloring book called I Am Coloring. So just different things in a different way, but I still think that it's so easy to lose sight of that play,
Yes.
that creativity. We talked a little bit offline about, how we have to create space because that actually allows us to unlock and to look at things more creatively.
Mm-hmm.
And anytime I feel like I'm in a rut and I'm like, I'm down or just not, the highest self that I feel like I could be, I always look and ask myself, and 9 times out of 10, it's just because I haven't created that space because I somehow got into the next goal, the next aspiration, and you're going. So I still, definitely have to work at it, but I still try to find a lot of time. Of course, my son also helps out with that too, and saying, hey, I don't want to play, I don't want you to work, I want you to do X, Y, and Z. So that always kind of gets you out of the weeds too.
That was the next question I was formulating in my head, is like, now that you have these young men in your life, that is, there. Has that changed the way that you work at all?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you have to be a lot more intentional about your time, and intentional about like, and I hear this, and one of the things I feel like I really try to do well is, stand on the shoulders of giants, so to speak, and really
Yes.
understand that, this life, although I have and try to blaze my own trail, it has been walked in some shape or fashion, before. So one of the things I always hear from parents is that, it goes so fast. And even just
Mm.
from, knowing him to, where we are now, it's gone so fast that I try to be very intentional about creating time and space for him. And I also know that like you have to try to teach him some of the things that I learned. I want to try to make sure that he understands that, especially as I see those entrepreneurial type of, characteristics in him. I want to, try to cultivate that as much as possible. So I think, yeah, absolutely. It's definitely changed me. And I think it's made me more intentional, more, um, present as well. And I think that's something that I hope and I always try to have translate into work too.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I talk to people about when they're like, what, I'm stuck. I don't remember, you know, what I did as a kid for the most part. And sometimes I have children and I'm like, what are they doing? Maybe you should sit with them for a minute. And they're like, oh, they're just in video games or whatever. It's like, one, you could learn how to do it, because I think as we grew up, I mean, granted, I had some of the more archaic games coming up, but man, we were addicted to those. We were able to figure them
Mm-hmm.
out, and it was fun to play together, and also too, you can have your child put that down and you can kind of figure out, well, what else can we do? And to kind of see the world through the eyes of a child, and it's not so burdensome. It's really pure, and it's like, man, to go back to that is a powerful thing. And like we were saying, that's kind of when the magic happens too. Because if you are constantly working and you're constantly your head's down, it's an amazing feeling when you put your head up and you're like, hey, look at all this going on out here that I didn't even see. And it's really, really inspirational. Um,
Yeah.
so, oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, like, I absolutely agree with that. It's kind of like that, and I feel like I had that, especially when I started my business, that naivete where you're like, the world is your oyster. You can literally do anything. You see like how they look at things. Like even like I have Minecraft now on my phone for the exact reason you talk about, where he was playing Minecraft and I'm like, okay, we
Yeah.
have this time that I call man hour, where it's me and him like spending time consistently together, all the time. So I said, let me download Minecraft, and he's building all these like mansions and worlds, and you see the world in an entirely different way by even just sitting down and just like having conversations and spending time together.
I love that you're saying that you have downloaded Minecraft just so you can basically have, some time to share together. It's like talking about the same thing. And actually, I have to admit that my daughter and I do the same thing.
Nice.
But it's fun, just for shows, and just like, it's time to watch some things together as a family or whatever, and just kind of unplug in that. Now, since we're talking about kids, and I'm going to go back to your mom for a second, and my question is, what did she think of young Gresh?
It's so funny because I think my parents have always been very much so like a big proponent. They always love you and care for you, want you to, fly as much as possible. But I think one of the things about being a parent, and I'm experiencing that now, is you also don't want to see your kid kind of get hurt. You don't want to see the downside of it. So I think very much so in the very beginning, I always call them my venture capitalists. So when I went to MJ Designs to try to get beads, they were the ones that were paying for that. Or when I needed to get things printed out, it was my parents that were able to do that, for the newspaper. It's so funny because I think as you get older, as you said in the very beginning, you start to say, okay, well, that was childish. And I don't want to say it in a derogatory or negative way, but now it's time to start doing these adult things. And I think that a lot of it is understanding that transition, and I think making kids more aware of not that you have to give that up, but just sometimes what the world's like, so that you prepare them for that shock that sometimes happens. So I think for me it was definitely like having that I think that environment that really helped me to kind of cultivate that. And then as I grew older, you start to get away from that. And it wasn't just parents, just everybody says, so where are you working? What do you do? Or when are you going to get a full time job? Or, even when I started my business, you hear all these things and it really could be disheartening to some degree. But I think it was just, I don't know if it's anything other than my hard headedness, where I said, hey, this is who I feel like I am. And I feel like I'm really, believe in God, and I really believe in like the direction of, the things and the gifts and the talents that he's put into us, that I felt like it wasn't just something that I wanted to do, it was something that I had to do and something that I needed
Oh,
to
I
do.
love that.
So it wasn't a should I do it? It's I have to do it. And I think that when you start to step into that and you start to communicate that, I think even those that are a little bit more kind of and as you get older, you realize it's not they're naysayers. They just don't want you to, they don't want to see you get hurt. They know it's hard, they know it's challenging, but I think if you understand that it's your calling and you can run and you can fly and do all those things, then I think they start to realize that that's exactly what they ultimately wanted anyways.
Cool. Cool. So what's next for Blue 16?
Yeah, so I have completed 1,600 podcasts at the beginning of this year. So I had a daily podcast and include a lot of different nuggets and information. One of the questions I asked was around CEO hacks for everybody that's on the show. So what I've been working on most recently is starting to compile that information, aggregate that information to get a lot of trends and information around like what makes people successful, what are their hacks and things that they can really lean on that they feel like make a huge difference in their business. And these can be books, these could be different tools, apps, software, whatever that is. So I'm working on creating a premium newsletter around that for people that are interested in not just hearing about it, but also understanding exactly how to leverage it. Because I think one of the biggest things that I've learned and I've heard consistently is that, no matter how much you try to fight it, you don't have more than 24 hours in the day, but you can leverage it in a way that makes you more effective and efficient. So that's ultimately what I hope to do and share with people.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I definitely am recommending people to check out your website. I think there's a lot of information there, and there's something for everyone, which is really great, especially if you're a COO or entrepreneur or things like that. And all the information will be in the notes to this podcast, so they can click on that and find you quite easily. But I want to thank you so much for your time today. This has been really, really great. My soul is always filled when I hear from other people that are entrepreneurial and just crazy thinkers like I am. It's like you find your people, which is always fun. So thank you so much.
Catherine, thank you.